Hi guys, it's Mr. Smith. I'm here again to give you a little intro to what you're going to be doing today. Now, your warm-up was from the last lesson on finding percentages. So, finding if you were given a number and a percent, you had to find out what the other number was. So, if you wanted to find 16% of 32, you would take 32 and multiply it by 0.16, which is kind of what we're looking at with the warm up. Now, remember, you guys are allowed to use calculators for these, so if you have access to a calculator at home, that's great. You can use it. If you don't have access to a calculator at home, you're more than welcome to Google an online calculator, and they work just as well as the ones at home. So, the first thing you had to do today was this warm up about the amusement park and the number of people that visited the amusement park. So, in the warm-up, it says that last Sunday, 1,575 people visited this amusement park. 56% were adults, 16% were teenagers, and 28% were children ages 12 and under. You need to figure out how many people, how many adults, how many teenagers, how many children ages 12 and under visited last Sunday. In order to do that, you need to take your 56% and you need to write it as a decimal. So for those of you who have forgotten how to write it as a decimal, you're going to take 56% and divide it by 100. If you were to do that in a calculator, you would get 0.56. So you're going to take your total number of people that visited the amusement park and multiply it by that 0.56, and you would get 882, which is what we have here. And that's the number of adults that visited the amusement park. You're then going to take that same total of people who visited the amusement park and multiply it by the decimal representation for 16%, which is 0.16. Again, if you were to take 16 divided by 100 in your calculator, you would get 0.16. When you multiply 0.16 times the 1,575, you would get 252 teenagers that visited the park that day. Then the last part, you're going to take 28%. Again, divide that by 100, you get 0.28. Multiply 0.28 times 1,575, the number of people who visited the park, and you would get 441, which is the number of children ages 12 and under that visited the park last Sunday. Now today, we're going to be finding the percentage. So we're going to be given two numbers, the part and the whole. Remember when we set them up as a fraction, we had the part on the top in the numerator and the whole on the bottom in the denominator. So you're going to be finding out what percentage that equals. So our learning target, I can solve different problems like 60 is what percentage of 40 by dividing and multiplying. Yes, we are going to divide and multiply. Now, here's an example for you. It says use a double number line diagram to determine what percent 18 is of 20. So, because this 20 comes after the word of, that's going to be our 100%. So we have 20 over 100% in our double number line. Now, because both of these end in a 0, I know that they can be divided by 10. So I'm going to be looking at 10%. I just like looking for those first when I start seeing these numbers that end in 0. So 10%, if we take 100 and divide it by 10, we get 10%. If we take 20 and divide it by 10, we get 2. And as you can see, I have these little hash marks, tick marks marked in here for the other percents counting from 10 to 100. So if you were to use this, you should have a double number line that would eventually look like this. Just like we did on Tuesday of last week, when you had your first lesson in math on Schoology, you saw a double number line and you're going to skip count. So we skip count by tens. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Because 10% lines up with 2, on the top, we're going to count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Now, we want to know what percent 18 is of 20. So we're going to look for our 18, and that is over top of the 90, so it is 90%. So that's one way that we can use, and this ended up being a pretty easy one to see. Sometimes these percentages get a little bit difficult when we start looking at, say, like 44%. So they're going to become a little bit more difficult. And the double number line isn't always going to be the best strategy. It's a strategy you can use, but it may not always be the best one. Now, when we're looking at using division and multiplication, we have the same problem. Now we're using division and multiplication to determine what percent 18 is of 20. So we're going to take our 18, and that's going to be our first number in our division statement, our division sign, and then we're going to take 20 because that comes after the word of, and that's going to be the number we divide by. So if you were to take 18 and divide it by 20, you would get 0.9, or 9/10. You take your 9/10 and you multiply it by 100, because percents are always out of 100. So 9/10 times 100, if you were to do this in your calculator, you would get 90, so that means it's 90%. Now, when we did division in class, we've also looked at it as a fraction instead of just as a straight horizontal division sentence. Looking at it as a fraction, we still take that 18 and that becomes our numerator, and our 20 comes over here and it becomes our denominator. Now, you may not know exactly what 18 divided by 20 is, how many times 20 goes into 18. But we can simplify these to help us figure it out. And since these are both even numbers, I'm going to divide by 2. So 18 divided by 2 equals 9. 20 divided by 2 equals 10. So we have 9/10. Well, I know how to write 9/10 as a decimal because I've used place value language, and I know that 9/10 as a decimal is 0.9 because this is the tenths place. So we still did division here, and then we're going to take our answer 0.9 or 9/10, and we're going to multiply it by 100 just like we did in the previous problem. So 9/10 times 100 equals 90%. Same answer we got with this method, and same answer we got with this method. So you can use any of these strategies to help you solve these problems. I would definitely, if you have a calculator available, I would definitely take out your calculator and use that, or Google one online, and you would take your numerator and divide it by your denominator. So the number that is before the word is going to be your numerator, or your dividend, your first number in your horizontal division statement, and after the word of, you're going to have your 20, which is your denominator. So the word after the number after the word of is going to be your denominator. Then, if you have questions with this, or you're struggling with this, you're going to be able to contact me through my office hours. You can contact Mrs. Tyler through her office hours. For those of you who have Mr. Lenhart in your class, you can contact him. For those of you who have Mrs. Langen in class as well, you can contact her. We all have office hours we can help you with. Now, the next things you're going to do, you're going to see in Schoology, there's going to be a Desmos activity. You're going to go into Desmos and you're going to use this table. There's going to be a table in there, and it's going to be partially filled out. I will give you a hint with that table. The 20 for Diego's jump roping time is always going to be your denominator. That will help you when you're going to figure out your fraction and your percentage. You're going to complete a discussion board post based on that table. What strategies you used. How do you think you did? Questions like that. Mrs. Tyler, Mrs. Langen, Mr. Lenhart, and I will all be making comments on your post and kind of giving you some feedback and maybe giving you some tips on how to go about doing this. You are also going to have an exit ticket that you're going to have to complete. There's going to be some practice problems. There is an honors activity to do for those of you in honors. And then there's some additional practice. The additional practice is optional. If you want to do it, you are more than welcome to. For anybody who would like to, we do expect that you spend about an hour on math every day, or every day that you have math in your Google Drive. So looks like it's going to be Monday and Wednesdays, or in Schoology. Sorry, it's going to be Mondays and Wednesdays. If you run into any problems, you are more than welcome. My office hours are Monday through Friday from 2 to 3:30. Mr. Lenhart, Mrs. Tyler, and Mrs. Langen all have different office hour times, so if you can't get to mine, you can always get to theirs. So go through Zoom. It's going to be through Zoom for those of you who haven't done it yet. There's a link in Schoology in the 6th grade staff office hours folder. You can use this time to ask for help on the assignments or how to navigate through Schoology to access or submit assignments. I know there's been some issues with submitting assignments last week. You can also use this time if you just want to talk. If you don't want to do Zoom, you want me to see your face, or you don't want any of the other teachers to see your face or talk to you that way, you're more than welcome to send a message through Schoology to me, to Mrs. Langen, Mrs. Tyler, Mr. Lenhart. Any of us will be more than happy to answer any questions. I hope you guys are staying safe at home. And again, feel free to contact us with any questions that you may have. Thank you. Bye.